guest. I see him in the background. Caleb Maupin. How you doing, Caleb? You doing okay this morning?
I'm good. I'm good. A lot is happening in our world, but just staying on
A,
top of it and doing the
a
best we
lot
can,
is
right?
happening. Yeah, that's all we can do, right? Caleb Maupin. He is a speaker, writer, journalist, political analyst, author. Caleb, what is the name of your new book?
It's called Trotsky and the Neoconservatives, the whole story. And that book has been doing quite well. It was the top new release for quite some time. And I
Good.
continue to do great conversations about it, explaining who the neoconservatives are and such. But yeah.
Well, I want to ask KY. The book is interesting just because I don't think people will entirely get the link. Like every so often, I'll be talking to someone who's like, those Trotskyists. and the audience is like, what? What are you talking about? What do you mean Trotskyists? These guys are neocons. Yeah, they don't have to see the link for it. So, no, the book is fantastic. And people can get it on Amazon, correct?
Yes. And it's a wide distribution. So anywhere books are sold, basically.
Oh, even better. Okay.
Yeah. That's generally how it works with my books. I mean, as long as you have the ISBN, if you can pull the ISBN somewhere off, you go to Amazon, get the ISBN, take it to any bookstore, you can tell them you want it, you can get it.
Excellent. So I brought you on for several stories. There's one story that you sent me that I also want to cover. I have to hit this first, though.
Okay.
So let's see if I can find it. Right here. And I guess there are two of these. Tom, what is his last name? It dropped out of my mind all of a sudden. Tom, it'll come to me in a moment, but the U.S. envoy for Syria.
Okay.
He is apparently doing an interview, and he's being very candid in this interview, which is Tom Barrett. That's it. He's been very candid in this interview, which is pretty amazing of some of the things that he is effectively openly stating in this interview. One of those things is something that is obvious, but I'm shocked that the United States is owning up to the fact that this is indeed policy at this point. I want to play two videos for you. I'm going to play this one first to get your comment. Then I'm going to play the second one that is even more revealing than this one.
Because who are they going to fight?
Such a thing can be the case.
Talking about the left, it's arming Hezbollah.
It's the only people who are there. So LAF being mostly Sunnis, there are Shias, and it's a good organization. It's well-meaning, but it's not well-equipped. Because who are they going to fight? Right? We don't want to arm them. We're going to arm them so they can fight Israel? I don't think so.
So I hope the audience understands what he's saying. He's making the argument like, look, who are we going to arm these guys to fight in Lebanon? We're obviously arming them to fight their own people. So he's owning the fact that we're trying to start a civil war in Lebanon. I mean, there's another video where he even alludes to the notion that these guys are terrified there's going to be a civil war, as he openly points out, well, yeah, we're arming them to fight their own people. We're not going to arm this other group so they can go fight Israel. We need them to fight Hezbollah. And he even notes in one of the other videos or the other clips that Hezbollah's case is swollen by the fact that Israel is effectively murdering people in multiple countries over and over and over again, meaning that the argument that Hezbollah makes of, look, we're here to defend Lebanon as a resistance group against a maniac government is that much more emboldened by the fact that Israel is a maniac government, killing people in Lebanon and killing people in other countries. That is pretty amazing admission. Is it just the U.S. no longer cares about secrecy and this stuff where it's nobody in America pays attention to it? And so what does it matter if indeed I'm openly admitting this kind of sinister behavior? Give me your thoughts on this. This seems outrageous to me.
Well, Google the Oded Yanan plan. Apparently that's been Israel's plan for quite some time, is to foment religious sectarianism and have the peoples of the region who are Muslim and oppose them fighting each other rather than opposing Israel. And that references Hillary Clinton's emails also. She said that Israel has thought for a long time that a region-wide Sunni-Shia war would be to its benefit. And I would argue that that was Barack Hussein Obama's plan as president. If you look at what the pivots were under his presidency, you had Saudi Arabia playing up the idea that there was a Shia crescent, playing up the idea that the Syrian government and Iran were, part of some kind of conspiracy of Shia Muslims to take over the world, and they were, sending these extremist fighters to Syria in the name of fighting the Shia apostates or Shia crescent, right? That was the narrative, and playing up the difference between the Sunnis and the Shias, and trying to divide the different ethnic groups has been what Israel's been trying to do for quite some time. So, I mean, it doesn't really surprise me that it's being openly stated now. A lot of things are out in the open, and that is one of the interesting aspects of the Trump era, right? When Trump acknowledged that Saudi Arabia murdered the journalist, right? You remember that whole thing? And he said, look, we sell them weapons. So, we got to keep selling them weapons. We make all this money. Right. I mean, it was just really blatant, and that's one of the weird things about the time we're in, is that they used to dress up what they did with pretenses of democracy and human rights. Not so much anymore. Now there's a little bit more honesty.
Yeah, but I mean, that's pretty ballsy to effectively admit, well, it's unclear whether or not Lebanon is even going to do that. There's been grand shows of displays of opposition to it, where let's say people within the country that are supportive of Hezbollah has shown support in mass. And the people that I've talked to made the point of saying, if they wanted to be taken over, this is the way to go about doing it. Meaning Hezbollah will occupy many of these buildings and everything else, not necessarily have a civil war, but definitely occupy the buildings that the president doesn't have the support in the military or the political space to do this. And so Tom here over and over again bemoans, well, we've given them the map. They just won't do it. They're all talk. We've told them what they need to do. And it's like, you've told them that they should have a civil war, and they have told you to effectively F off because they can't do it. So what he interprets is, well, they're just all talk because they won't have a civil war. That's pretty amazing. I don't know. I feel you. The Trump administration has been more open about sinister behavior that under normal circumstances, other presidents have the sense they try to hide to maintain the image of America. But that is still pretty heady to just openly say, yes, we're trying to get these people to kill each other. That's what we're trying to do. That's Indeed. Our goal. That's our objective.
Yeah.
To make this even worse, there is this. He continues in this interview, and he makes this statement. Hey, where do you think this is going to go?
What's the end game?
I was hoping you weren't going to ask that, because I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. Look, the end game, when we say peace, it's an illusion. There's never been peace. There will probably never be peace, because everybody's fighting for legitimacy. The end result is somebody wants dominance, which means somebody has to submit. In that part of the world, submit, there's no Arabic word for submit. They can't wrap their head around submit. So eventually, prosperity is the only answer.
I hate him as a human being. I swear to God, I do. He sits there in a suit. Mind you, this is the one who called them animals, as he openly opines in a suit. Well, I'm just trying to get them to murder each other. That's all. I'm trying to get them to kill as many of themselves as they possibly can. That's what I'm trying to do. And he's sitting here in a suit as if he's this elegant, suave thinker. It's like, dude, you are a sociopath. You're a psychopath. As you sit here in the suit, just opining openly about getting people to murder each other. And then when they press him on this, because they're very agitated about the fact that I am trying to get you to murder each other. He's like, you animals. You need, you're acting like animals. You just need to calm down. You need to chill out. You need to be calm about what we're trying to do in your region of the world. He admits there, we have no plan in mind. We have no outcome that we can come up with that we think this is going to take place, because they're just so warlike and they're just going to keep fighting each other.
Well, the disturbing thing about that clip is, I think the interviewer is looking at him, and it's supposed to be so deep. It's supposed to be so edgy. Like, there is no plan. Like, there's just never going to be peace, man. Whoa. Yeah. We're so on it, man. We're deep. We're edgy. We're admitting it when no one else admits. We understand it. Right. And that just comes across. That's just kind of sickening. The other thing is that, he says there's no Arabic word for submit. Islam is the way of submission, right? That is the entire name of the Islamic faith. So, you almost wonder if that's some kind of weirdly coded message or something. He has to know that, right? I mean, so.
No, he doesn't. Donald Trump believes that the Albanians were fighting the Algerians. Like, he doesn't. I don't think these people are competent, like in the way that I think you think they are.
Okay. Well, I mean, that was just odd to hear him say that there's no Arabic word for submission. I'm just thinking, like, I mean, something's off, but I mean, maybe I'm giving him too much credit there. Maybe he's just, yeah. Again, I didn't like the tone of the interview, like the way it was just like, I'm sure he thought he was just being so bold and realistic or something. It's like, wow, that's great. And also economic development would bring people together. If people are trading with each other, if there's jobs and opportunities, there could be possibilities for such a thing. And the Soviet Union was very interested in doing that. In the 70s and 80s, there was talk of the Soviet Union, launching a plan to have the Arab countries start trading with each other, to have them not just become oil plantations for Wall Street, but to have, joint development projects, green the desert, with irrigation systems, and if we did that, I think we could see peace in the region. And that's what China is trying to do with their Belt and Road Initiative. And they have stabilized a lot of regions that have had issues with drug dealers and terrorists and other extremist elements and such. I mean, if you look at, the Uyghur regions, how is it that China got, the Uyghur separatist stuff to calm down? Is with jobs, right? Exactly. They provided economic opportunity. And, when people have jobs and, a better future, they don't get involved in terrorist groups.
But that's not what he means. He's talking about the Abraham Accords. I mean, do you really think that a guy who is openly opining about getting people to murder each other in a country for the benefit of America, that he really cares about economic development in the region of the Middle East? Do you really think the U.S. cares about that? We care about submission.
No. And I think that, economic development would hedge into the monopoly. I mean, that's, again, imperialism is monopolistic capitalism. It's about keeping these countries in poverty. And, if they were to develop their own industries and, raise their people up and all of that, they would be competitors then. And they don't want competitors.
Yeah. They're talking about Abraham, of course. They're talking about submission to the larger state of Israel for all intents and purposes, with Israel being the hegemon in the region. I mean, Donald Trump, apparently he is meeting with multiple Arab states that are effectively quislings of the U.S. to try to find an offload ramp to get those states to take over, I guess, Gaza militarily. I don't like, this is grotesque. I guess that's my main point about all of this. The other story I wanted to hit has to do with Jawlani being in the United States. Now, Jawlani is still, there's a wanted poster still on the U.S. Embassy's website for Jawlani. Let me see if I have this up. Yeah, so I still have this up. All right, this is Jawlani meeting David Petraeus, which, if anybody here is under, let's say, 20, you may not know how wild this is or grotesque this is. But this is these two in a meeting. Oh, they're just bros. They're just bros. Petraeus says something to the effect of, yeah, I had a difficult time in Iraq. And Jawlani points out, yeah, but you had the opportunity to leave Iraq. I don't have the opportunity to leave Syria. And of course, they ham it up. You have pictures of Rubio shaking hands with Jawlani. If you were an American soldier, what are you thinking about right now? Especially if you had the inopportune fortune to be fighting in Iraq, only for several years later, for one of the leaders in Iraq to now be shaking hands with a guy who chops off heads.
Well, it presents a lot of questions for sure. I attended Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation hearings as intelligence director on Capitol Hill, and she talked about Jawlani a lot. And she seemed to talk about him as a terrorist, as a murderer, how angry she is that he's running Syria. And she's our intelligence director. And it seemed like that was the main thrust of her confirmation hearing, was just how much she hates Jawlani. So, but then we have David Petraeus, former CIA director and, military general and such. And he's there palling around with him. And they still have the wanted poster on the website, right? I mean, it's like, it's not, he's not. So all of this raises some questions. When we talk about Guantanamo Bay, there are former Taliban officials who were in Guantanamo from the time of 9/11, were released, and are now running Afghanistan. And you have to wonder, like, how, these forces have always functioned as proxies of the United States. Let's be completely clear about that. The Wahhabis, the reason Wahhabi Islam spread all over the world was in the 70s and 80s. Saudi Arabia had a lot more money, and the U.S. government wanted to use them to fight against communism. And so in Afghanistan, you had, Osama bin Laden, the heir of the state monopoly construction firm of Saudi Arabia, sent to Afghanistan to mobilize an army of Wahhabi extremists to fight against the People's Democratic Party and the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. And the Saudi ideology spread all over the world as something that the USA was propping up to fight against communism, to fight against anti-imperialism. And every conflict, they're on the side of the United States. In Chechnya, they worked against the Soviet Union, against Russia, on the side of the United States. In Syria, they worked against the Syrian government and Bashar Assad and Ba'athist Arab socialism, on the side of the United States. In Libya, they were against Gaddafi. There's not one place you can point to where the Al-Qaeda linked forces are really at odds with the USA and not on the US side. So it's interesting. After 9/11, we were all told, oh my God, we got to go get Al-Qaeda. We're going to fight Al-Qaeda. But Al-Qaeda has always been on the side of the American government. Gaddafi offered to torture people in support of the U.S. war on terror. The Syrian government was a big supporter of the war on terror because they had been fighting Al-Qaeda linked extremists for a long time. The USA, the war on terror has been the USA acting as Al-Qaeda's air force and bringing down the various governments that got in their way and enabling them to set up shop in countries. The overthrow of Gaddafi's enabled Al-Qaeda to get much stronger. The overthrow of the Syrian government, we've got a literal Al-Qaeda terrorist who's now the leader, Jawlani. And so this raises a lot of questions, but Guantanamo Bay exists. They did hold a lot of these people in Guantanamo Bay for years. And work on them. And then they've released a number of them. And now they are in the Taliban government of Afghanistan. Something's up. Something's going on here. You ask a lot of questions. There's also the case in Pakistan where there was this very, very prominent Wahhabi scholar, Afia Siddiqui, who's still being held by the U.S. government. And she was, abducted and, in charge, and she's in prison in the United States. And a lot of the ISIS terrorist attacks are being done. They always will name, well, we do this in support of Afia Siddiqui. You have to wonder what's going on. It's like that a whole network of Wahhabi extremists exists, right? And then the U.S. government fights them, but also uses them as attack dogs. Yes. And it's like, the whole thing about gangs and counter gangs. And it's like, we have no problem with extremists as long as they're, pointing the gun in one direction. As long as the bullets are flying in one direction, we're fine with them. And, Al-Qaeda has never really been an enemy of the U.S. government as much as they say it is. And it looks like it's still not. And that people who thought that after 9/11, we were going to just go get the people who did this and bring justice, that was never the intent, it looks like.
Yeah, it's disturbing. That's all. It's very disturbing. I know people who fought in that war, and of course, those people were told by people like Petraeus, "Well, we're fighting, against Al-Qaeda. We're fighting against terrorists. We're fighting against all of these horrible people who chop off heads. Who put I can't think of the guy's name. They put him in a cage and they set him on fire. Like these are the people who we're fighting against." And then Trump goes, shakes the guy's hand. And then he goes visiting the New York skyline, the same skyline that other people in his organization actually changed in New York. It's just wild. And I don't know if America is making the association. Laura Loomer, of all people, weirdly enough, made the association. She says, oh my God, there's a terrorist walking through the streets of New York. And she flipped out on social media saying, what the hell is this? How is this taking place? How is this guy walking the streets of the US? He murdered Americans, et cetera, et cetera. She seemed to get it. The other people, not so much. I'm just imagining him going to a store in New York, buying a coffee and a Tic Tac, and New Yorker having no clue that he was part of the organization that was responsible for taking down the towers. It's just amazing. It's just mind blowing. You sent me an article, and I got to be honest, I wasn't aware of this. And you point, I've tried to send this to my Twitter account for God knows how many times, and for whatever reason, it's not showing up on my Twitter account. So I'm just going to read it out. Religious persecution of peace activists escalates in South Korea. Now, I have to be honest with you. This would make sense to me under the previous president, Yoon Suk Yeol. But with the new president, who I have not remembered his name yet, because I haven't necessarily hit the stories enough with him to remember his name, but he is far more progressive and far more open to working with North Korea. It is an oddity to me that he would be presiding over persecution. So please explain the story to me. Give me context for this.
Well, there was an attempted coup by the previous president.
Yes.
And after that coup, the country's kind of in shock that went on. And the new party that's in power is now going after religious organizations. And they've been targeting a number of different prominent churches in South Korea that are perceived as in some way being aligned with the conservative party. And
I see.
One church they're going after, though, is the Unification Church, which is the main church that has been an advocate for peace with North Korea. It's the most trusted by North Korea, so much so that, North Korea has actually sent them gifts, and they were the main foreign investor in North Korea. They set up North Korea's state-run car company and all of that. And the Unification Church, started by the Reverend Sun Myung Moon, now continued by his widow, Dr. Hak Jahan. They are they run the Washington Times, which is the newspaper and conservative Republican newspaper in Washington, D.C.
Do they? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're the owners of it. And they have been the main advocates. They're responsible for Trump visiting North Korea during his first term.
Wait. Just so I'm clear, you're saying that the Washington Times is run by a South Korean outfit? I mean,
Yes.
a South Korean Unification Church? Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, the Unification Church are the founders and legal owners of the Washington Times.
Wow.
And they're conservatives. There's a wide variety of views. I think there are people that are members of their religion that voted for liberals or Democrats. They don't take sides generally in politics, but they tend to lean conservative and anti-communist, etc. But what's interesting is that they did become the main investor in North Korea in the 90s. They set up a state-run car company there, and it was kind of, and so now the latest development is, as of yesterday, Mrs. Moon, Dr. Hak Jahan, is in police custody. She's been arrested. She's 82 years old, and they are trying to put her in jail for bribery. And the allegations are very, very, weak. I mean, if you look at it, the allegation is that a former leader of the church gave a $3,000 handbag to the former first lady.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and it's the most if you look at South Korea and you look at their economy and you look at politicians and the lavish life that they live, a $3,000 handbag is not gonna make or break. I mean, that's and on top of that, for it to be a bribe, I'm not a South Korean lawyer. I don't know their legal system, but generally a bribe requires a quid pro quo. It's, you do this for me and I will do this for you. And there was no quid pro quo that I can understand. And, I went to their event in upstate New York on Sunday, where they had about 1,000 people gathered. They were very worried. She was, taken into a detention facility on Monday. And the idea was the judge was going to rule on whether or not to proceed with criminal charges against her. And the judge did rule that she would face criminal charges. And so she's 82 years old. She's just out of the hospital. She just had heart surgery. And now she is arrested, pending trial for this bribery charge, because not her, but a former church leader who's no longer with them gave this handbag to the former first lady. I mean, it's completely absurd. But it's pointing to the turmoil in South Korean politics, which is that there's every new government that comes in kind of has to put the previous government in jail, and that's part of the weird political turmoil the country is facing. A lot of which has to do with the fact that China is rising in influence in South Korea, but the United States has thousands and thousands of troops there. And, South Korea is not in the situation it used to be. It used to be South Korea was pretty much a straight up U.S. backed military dictatorship fighting against North Korea. Now the population wants peace with North Korea. Now China is an important trading partner of South Korea, and so there's a lot of infighting in the political process. Which way is South Korea going to go? And it looks like this church that is an advocate of peace with North Korea has been caught up and targeted in this political infighting. It's kind of disturbing. And I've noticed that the main person who's speaking up on their behalf is Newt Gingrich, of all people, the conservative.
That's weird.
Yeah, he's speaking up on their behalf. And, but they've put out quite a few statements and videos, and they very much feel that their efforts advocating peace with North Korea and their efforts, to help and enable Trump to get to North Korea in his first term are why they're being targeted. They feel that that's what has made them a target. If you watch the statements that Reverend Damien Dunkley, their leader, has put out, it's actually very interesting, and that they are historically considered to be a conservative church, and they were very anti-communist, but then they, reconciled with North Korea and became advocates of peace with North Korea, and so now they're caught up in this political turmoil, and they have pointed out that the persecution that they're facing, I mean, there are other churches that are being hit with a lot more charges. It seems like there's just, generally the conservative party tends to be aligned with more religious people. And this is the Liberal Party is going after as many churches that they can as a way to kind of weaken the conservative party. So, but it is weird to see them be, singled out this way, and to see that their 82-year-old leader is now, dragged into jail. That's very, very much a big concern. President Trump did mention this in his meeting with the South Korean president. And the question is how this could impact, what's going to happen. Apparently, Trump is headed to South Korea at the end of October. So that is quite interesting, and we'll see how that develops. But it's certainly a disturbing situation. I mean, it is important to note also the Unification Church was outlawed in Japan this summer. Now, that was an ongoing situation. That relates to what you and I talk a lot about Russia, because what happened in Japan was, Shinzo Abe, who is the conservative former prime minister, he was not in favor of isolating Russia. He says Vladimir Putin is his friend. And, he was saying at the time of the special military operation, right when it started up, he said, let's not demonize Russia. Let's try to de-escalate this and negotiate. And then what happened? Well, he was gunned down on the streets of Japan. And who killed him? Well, the guy who shot him spoke up and he said, well, I shot him because my mom's in the Unification Church and I hate the Unification Church. They're a cult and I'm mad at the Unification Church. Now, and he killed Shinzo Abe, shot him right on the streets of Japan. So then the Japanese media went into an overdrive, basically echoing the narrative of the killer and saying, oh, wow, the church is bad. And then based on that, now it took kind of a 3-year process. The Japanese government forcibly disbanded the Unification Church of Japan, shut down their bank accounts, seized their church assets. A lot of their church leaders from Japan have had to flee to the United States because they have nothing. I mean, they've lost everything. And so the Japanese government outlawed them in July and forcibly disbanded them. And now they're facing this persecution in South Korea. This is very, very interesting. It's very, very interesting. And, it says to me that the role that they play in terms of diplomacy and their relationship with North Korea is getting them targeted in a way that the killing of Shinzo Abe, I look at that, I think that was about Russia, right? And the fact that Russian president has brought Shinzo Abe's widow to Japan just earlier this year, right? And he gave her his personal limousine as a gift, right? Russian President Vladimir Putin very much knows that Shinzo Abe was murdered for being sympathetic to Russia, right? It was that. But yet the people that the trigger man that they found, it appears, is somebody who hates the Unification Church. This is very odd. And that there are, during the 70s, there were these things called deprogrammers. You know about the deprogrammers?
You mean
right?
like MK Ultra?
It was, people were joining the Unification Church or Scientology or communist groups or whatever. And so then there were these people that your parents could hire. If you were a legal adult, you're a college age student who was joining one of these groups, you could hire somebody who would kidnap them and unbrainwash them, right? It was a big thing that went on in the 70s, the deprogrammers, and they held people against their will and deprogrammed them from, from their political group. And it was something called the Cult Awareness Network was created, and they engaged in these kidnappings. And ultimately, the guy who started them, Ted Patrick, went to prison for doing this because you can't kidnap legal adults against their will. That is a crime.
Right.
And they were forcibly, they were sued out of existence after they kidnapped multiple people and violated their civil rights, basically, with false imprisonment. That happened in the 70s. But there was a whole network of people created, this Cult Awareness Network, that was created, that is very much tied in with intelligence to some degree or other, right? That I think a lot of these religious groups or political groups that were targeted were viewed as being potential pawns of intelligence. And so American intelligence and U.S. government intelligence and some wings of the American state seem to have launched this deprogrammer thing. And it is these deprogrammer networks that apparently this guy who killed Shinzo Abe was tied into. He had, he'd grown up in the Unification Church. He quit the Unification Church. He was really mad at it. And he was involved in these deprogrammer networks of people who hate the Unification Church. He then went and killed Shinzo Abe. And I was kind of impressed with the assassination, I must say, because in Japan, you can't have a gun. Guns are completely illegal in Japan.
Right.
This guy made a gun himself, right? It was a homemade gun, and he got 2 shots out of it. That takes a huge amount of skill. This guy, like with a 3D printer, made his own gun with 2 barrels, found a former prime minister on the street, and killed him with his homemade gun. That takes a level of skill. That's not something that the average person can just do. Right.
It seems implausible.
And shot to kill. Shot to kill with his homemade gun. But yet he's tied in with these, these deprogrammer circles. And these deprogrammers, right, the main guru of the deprogrammer circles was trained by a U.S. military psychologist, right?
Dr. Steve Hasen. I'm sorry to interrupt. Just to be clear, this was a political hit. I mean,
yeah, clearly it was.
And just to back it up, it is very strange for somebody to murder a prime minister. And then the media says he was going after Shinzo Abe because of his mom was in a Unification Church. And they side with the murderer and going after the church? How bizarre is that? I mean, that's obviously a political cudgel. Yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt. Please continue.
No, go ahead. Yeah. And so there are these networks of people who don't like the Unification Church and don't like other groups and have engaged in these kidnappings. And they seem to be tied to American intelligence. The guy who leads these networks, their big name, is a guy named Dr. Steve Hasen. And he wrote a book called The Cult of Trump that was, a big selling book. And he was on CNN after January 6th. He said, all of America needs to be deprogrammed from the cult of Trump. And he claims that Trump is like hypnotizing people and using hypnosis and stuff. It's one of the most bizarre things ever. But, he was trained by, prominent, he cites a prominent U.S. military psychologist, one of the MK Ultra guys, as being his mentor who trained him. And I exposed that he was the advisor to BreadTube. Remember BreadTube, ContraPoints, and Vosh and all of them? They were all being advised by Steve Hasen. And I got that information.
Seriously? I didn't know that. Are you serious?
I am serious. And I wrote my book, BreadTube Serves Imperialism, that made a big splash because it was revealed to me. I received a dossier showing that Dr. Steve Hasen, the deprogrammer guy, was telling BreadTube how to do their thing. Right. And then Gray Zone then later revealed that it was that BreadTube was being subsidized by MI6, British intelligence. Right. That Abigail Thorne was being paid by them to make propaganda against Syria and, about the vaccine mandates and things like that. And so, this all is like all wrapped up into one thing. And I see, the killing of Shinzo Abe and then the Unification Church being outlawed in Japan. And, Shinzo Abe's position on Russia, and then their relationship with North Korea, how North Korea and Russia are very, very close now. And now I see that they're jailing the leader in South Korea, and it's like it's all connected. And it sounds almost like crazy a little bit, but it's like we're looking at a very elaborate scheme, a very elaborate world of, different networks and stuff. And then you see the Russian president taking Shinzo Abe's widow to Russia and giving her his personal limousine as a gift, basically saying, I support you. And I know that your husband was killed because he wanted to have peace with Russia. And I'm telling you, man, this is there's a lot here, right? But this is worth paying attention to. This story about what's going on with Hak Jahan Moon and the fact that, there are some people in the Trump administration who want to make peace with Russia, right? And Tulsi Gabbard and others, and Donald Trump is headed to South Korea in October, and so now Hak Jahan Moon, Holy Mother Han, the widow of Reverend Sun Myung Moon, is in jail and possibly facing criminal charges. This is all connected, and we have to understand how all of this works, right? We live in a strange world where, if you just look at this from the outside, you wouldn't realize how much, the quote unquote intelligence world, how much the spook world, if you want to call it that, right, is present, right? And that there are networks doing all kinds of crazy things, and it's all connected. So there you go.
Just for the basics, I just want to make sure I understand the basics.
Yeah.
The former first lady gave her a $3,000 handbag. And from that, they said you're getting bribed. And as you're getting
the allegation, a former leader of the church gave the former first lady a $3,000 handbag.
Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah.
A former leader of the church gave the former. Okay. And
yeah,
they're saying you're trying to bribe the first lady.
Yeah. And he's quit the church since. He's no longer involved. And he apparently, there was some investigation internally. There was some issues with that guy, but he's left the church since then. So that they have now arrested, Mother Moon, Holy Mother Han, for that, right? Saying that she bribed the former first lady with this $3,000 handbag.
And just to be clear, the former first lady is of Young Suk Yeol.
Yeah, of the previous president who tried to do the.
I mean, let's be honest though. He wasn't just trying to do a coup. He was trying to start a war with North Korea, and use that as a pretext to murder his political opposition. I mean, to call it a coup is such an understatement. I understand your point that she might not have had anything to do with it. But the fact that, and this is not me justifying the government's reaction to this, especially going after a religious figure that obviously given a $3,000 handbag is not a bribe.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the reactiveness on this one though.
Okay.
I get it. Whether it's right or wrong, I do get it. I mean, he tried to literally, and to make it even worse, part of the rationale for this was because North Koreans were helping the Russians in Russia push back the Ukrainian military. And it seems that what the United States wanted to do was take control of the South Korean military within the context of this, so he can create a justification to send those soldiers into Russia to fight the Russian military. Like, meaning it went far deeper than just him trying to overthrow the government. The moment that the military is activated, the United States get control of the South Korean military. That's my understanding of the way that their military operates. And so if you're able to become a dictator and you're able to say, well, my opposition is working with the Chinese, or what seemed to be the plot that he was trying to create was the North Koreans killed the political opposition, which justifies a war against North Korea now, which on some level affects the North Korean influence in Ukraine. Like, this stuff was a web of stuff that these guys were effectively trying to do, with the United States seemingly being behind this, considering the U.S. had nothing to say about an obvious and overt coup attempt that was trying to take place on South Korean soil. So if my point in this is saying this is, if they're looking for anything that they think has anything to do with that, this may be where she is getting swept up into. Or you don't take it that way. You take it more so as, no, this is more to do with the intel. The reason why the story doesn't make sense to me is because he was trying to start a war with North Korea. Yeah. And so if this was trying to be a unification between North Korea and South Korea, that government was doing everything in its power to prevent that reunification, and not just prevent that reunification.
Well, right. And when the coup happened, I will say the Unification Church people were very afraid that Mrs. Moon would be arrested during the coup. They almost expected her to be arrested during the coup. They expected her to be considered, because they were, there was going to be arrests of what they considered pro-North activists, right? That's what the coup, and so they were very afraid for her safety during the coup. They expected that she would be arrested, if the coup was successful. So, they were not supporting the coup.
But that's what I'm getting at. The government wasn't pro-North Korea, though. The government was trying to provoke a war with North Korea.
Right. So the other thing is that Sue Mi Terry, have you looked at that case? Right. No. So the top advisor to both Bush and Obama on North Korea related matters is this woman named Sue Mi Terry. And Joe Biden indicted Sumi Terry under the Foreign Agents Registration Act and charged her with being an unregistered agent of South Korea, right? And she's still indicted. Trump has not lifted the charges. And it's also a handbag. It's also
Are you serious?
yeah, the South Korean, diplomats took her shopping and bought her handbags, and and she's also indicted. And her husband is Max Boot, and she's kind of an important figure in the foreign policy establishment of the United States. But she's facing a prison sentence possibly for being a foreign agent because the South Korean government supposedly bought her handbags. So this is all, there's something going on here. I'm just telling you.
This is a trope at this point. I mean, it's almost like they leave, it's almost like if somebody hacks a computer and they leave their call sign, and that handbag is a call sign to make the point of saying, this is an intel, this is not serious.
Yeah.
Like something else has gone on in regards to the way this is operating. She get a $3,000 handbag, and the court literally looks at that and said, this is clearly a bribe that she got a handbag.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that the government was against the North Korea. I guess what gets me is I don't fully understand how she had a relationship with the previous disgraced president, or at the very least with the wife, despite the fact that the previous president was against North Korea and trying to use or to start a war with North Korea while she was at the Unification Church. It seems like the political priorities will be dramatically different. That's what's confusing me.
Well, and that also they're not, during the 1970s and 80s, they were a very, conservative force. Fighting communism was their focus. But they made the point, and I went to their event in upstate New York where they kind of went over the details of the case. They made the point, we're not politically aligned. We don't endorse the conservatives. We don't endorse the liberals. We are just a church in South Korea now, so, it's a very, very odd situation. And I really don't know what to make of it. But like you said, the handbags, this is a political job. I mean, they're going after the Unification Church for political reasons. And it's probably tied in with what's going on in Japan also, right? That they are viewed as an entity that the deep state can't control. I mean, they've made somebody mad within the power structure, and somebody's threatened by them. And there are these networks of people who oppose them, right? And that's also very mysterious. And Dr. Steve Hassan, who is their big enemy, right? It's his networks, apparently the guy who killed Shinzo Abe, are tied in with, right? And Dr. Steve Hassan, he always says, he's against cults, and Russia is a political cult, and China is the world's largest political cult. And, and he's a Russiagator to the extreme. He claims that, Trump was colluding with Russia, and that Alex Jones is secretly getting orders from Moscow. And, those deprogrammer networks are really, really pro-U.S. foreign policy, pro-regime change, etc. And so it's all very, very strange. The other thing that's interesting about this is there's kind of a parallel here that I've noticed is, during the Cold War, the American government propped up various entities to fight communism, right?
Yes.
Like Manuel Noriega, the leader of Panama, right? He was a military dictator who was against communism. So the U.S. government propped him up, but they didn't really like them. It was just kind of like, okay, we'll tolerate you and we'll prop you up to fight communism. But then after the fall of the Soviet Union, George Soros started destabilizing those countries too, because the way you set up like a military dictatorship, you have to be very strong. You have to be very economically prosperous. You have to actually hand out the goods, right? And like Park Chung-hee, who was the dictator of South Korea, he was handing out the goods. He built the modern South Korean economy, and the USA kind of had to tolerate it because it was against communism. But eventually it looks like they got rid of him, and they had the Koreagate hearings of 1978, 1979, and he died under very mysterious circumstances. You look at the death of Park Chung-hee, and that, the Carter administration very much wanted Park Chung-hee out. And he was assassinated by the head of the Korean CIA while they were having dinner at his house, just shot him in the face. And then the head of the Korean CIA was summarily executed and never got to state his motive for killing Park Chung-hee, the military dictator. And that it's like, on the one hand, the U.S. government will prop up these entities, but it doesn't really trust them and it doesn't really like them. And it's always kind of threatened by them. You know what I'm saying? And it's kind of like what we talked about before about with like Al-Qaeda, right? They were willing to back Al-Qaeda, but to some degree or other, they want to assert control over it, right? And it's, it's this game where it's like that in order to fight, communism, in order to maintain the dominance of imperialism, part of it is propping up entities that you don't totally control. That seems to be part of the game that they play. So, I mean, that's a factor you have to look into here, and that they don't really trust any illiberal organization, no religion, no mass political movement. They don't really trust any of them, but they will boost them here and there for their own ends.
Caleb, this has been a fascinating story. I swear to God. Spy versus spy in this kind of very strange way. It's like we can't see, it's so murky in regards to seeing what is actually taking place. But obviously, she was set up.
Yeah.
She was clearly set up. Man, I'm going to put the story at the bottom of the video just so people will be able to see it for themselves. And I would attach it to the website itself, the Center for Political Innovation. That way people can just read it. You wrote it out so people can get an understanding of all of this stuff as it takes place. Thank you for this. Thank you for giving me this story, by the way. I didn't realize there's so many stories that are taking place that we're just completely unaware of that are happening. So thank you for this.
Sure.
Caleb Maupin. He is speaker, writer, journalist, political analyst, author. His latest book, Trotsky and the Neoconservatives. You can get that book pretty much anywhere, as he pointed out. It's on Amazon. You can even get it from your bookstore if you have the ISBN. Also, Center for Political Innovation. That's an organization that Caleb has started. And I'm trying to think, is there anywhere else people can find you, Caleb?
Hey, I'm all over YouTube. I do regular streams and all of that. So yeah, I'm everywhere. So there you go.
Fantastic. You have a fantastic rest of your day, man. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Talk to you soon. Yep. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Wow. Caleb is fantastic. I've said it on more than one occasion. You can sit there and listen to Caleb for like an hour. He is really good. But we've come to the end. We've come to the end. Black Spock. Shout out to you, Black Spock. Thank you for that super chat. Oh, super sticker. I'm sorry. I don't know the difference between a super chat and a super sticker. I don't know why you need to. But apparently YouTube found it that they did. So shout out to you, Black Spock. As I always point out, you guys, what is this? Great stream. What is Red Axis saying? I think that's Red Axis. Great stream. Caleb on his channel. Caleb Maupin. Yes. Very fun. Cool music. Yeah, Caleb Maupin is cool people.